My name is Naomi Evans, and I'm 29 years old. As my SUV rolled onto the old dirt road leading to the ranch just outside Bakersfield, California, my palms were sweating against the steering wheel, even with the AC blasting on its coldest setting. 5 years, long enough for me to grow, to achieve what no one in my family thought possible, and long enough for them to keep living inside their bubble of pride and bias. In the trunk, tucked between a few everyday outfits and a pair of worn hiking boots, I had hidden my dress uniform, the one with the silver eagle insignia on the shoulders. It was my greatest pride, yet something my parents would never ask about. Tomorrow, my father's company, Stratwell Technologies, would host their annual strategic conference. They had no idea that I was the Pentagon representative sent to oversee a defense contract worth over $1 billion between the military and the corporation. I parked right in front of the porch, the same porch where my mother used to plant lavender, now dry and overgrown with weeds. Even the wooden sign that once read Evans Family Ranch had faded so much it was barely legible. Nothing had changed. It was as if this place had refused to grow with time. When I opened the front door, the familiar scent of old wood, leftover food, and cheap floor cleaner hit me. Just like it had when I was 18, about to leave for ROTC despite my family's disapproval. "Naomi, you're home?" my mother called from the kitchen, her voice as indifferent as if I'd only been out running errands, not gone for half a decade. She didn't come out to see me. She didn't turn around. Just the sound of chopping and the faint smell of stew filled the air. "Just got in," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Your brother's on his way too. Spencer just got promoted to regional manager at Stratwell. The HR director called him personally." Her voice beamed with pride, the kind I had never heard, not once, in 11 years of military service. I set my bag down and walked silently through the hallway lined with family pictures. Each frame held a memory I wasn't part of. Spencer at graduation, Mom holding a newborn grandchild, Dad shaking hands with a corporate CEO. None showed my commissioning ceremony, no newspaper clippings, no acknowledgement of the operations I'd been part of. I climbed the stairs and opened the door to my old room. Everything was exactly as I had left it, from the band posters still crooked on the wall, to the scratch on the desk I made during finals in 11th grade. This room was the only witness to the night I cried after Dad told me only people who aren't smart enough for real college join the military. I sat on the bed, brushing my hand across the thin quilt Mom had sewn for me when I was little. A small part of me had hoped that when I returned, someone would ask, "Naomi, what have you done?" Not to judge, but to truly listen. But I knew better. That wasn't going to happen. I opened my bag and pulled out the perfectly pressed uniform, medals aligned according to rank. The silver eagle insignia gleamed in the late afternoon light through the curtains. A quiet reminder that I had gone farther than anyone in this family ever imagined. Tomorrow, I would walk into Stratwell's conference not as the rebellious daughter my father once said would amount to nothing, but as the colonel assigned to oversee the nation's defense collaboration. And when the name Colonel Naomi Evans was announced in that room, it wouldn't be for admiration. It would be because they had no choice but to acknowledge it. I hung my uniform in the closet, hiding it behind my old high school clothes. Tonight I would sit at the dinner table again, listen to stories about Spencer, about the company, about bright futures, but tomorrow everything would change. That dinner took place in the same kitchen I had grown to despise during my teenage years, not because it was ugly, but because the air was always thick with favoritism. "Spencer's here," my mother called out from the front door, as if announcing the arrival of some honored guest. I heard the car pull in, followed by the cheerful laughter of my younger brother and his wife, Kayla. They entered the house like they were stepping onto a red carpet. Spencer wearing a perfectly tailored shirt, Kayla carrying a bottle of red wine, the kind my mother always praised to the skies. "My dear sister," Spencer beamed when he saw me, but his eyes barely skimmed over my simple outfit before turning to our father. "Dad, you're looking sharp tonight." My son, of course, Dad replied with a loud laugh, pulling out the chair next to him, the apparent default seat for the successful. I sat across from them and quietly scooped myself some salad. Kayla started chatting about the new house they just bought in North Fresno, over 2,800 square feet with a home office and an outdoor jacuzzi. And the kitchen is just perfect, Kayla added, glancing sideways at me. Very different from cooking on military trucks, right, Naomi? I looked up, offering a faint smile. Yeah, hard to fit a jacuzzi into an armored vehicle. No one laughed. My mother quickly changed the subject, clearly annoyed by the detour. Spencer was just selected as regional lead for the West Coast at Stratwell, Naomi, she said with thinly veiled pride. The new CEO signed off on his promotion personally. They said he has a leadership mindset and great potential. That's impressive, I nodded. The company must really trust him. A clearer path than whatever you're doing in the army, my father chimed in, swirling his wine glass. I've never really understood why you chose that route. I always thought you'd go into consulting or at least become a university lecturer. I think I answered that question about 10 years ago, I replied. Well, you're still in the army, right? He asked again, as if he honestly couldn't remember. What rank are you now? Lieutenant? Captain? Spencer chuckled while slicing his steak. Dad, I'd say she's probably made it to major at least, right, Naomi? I looked at all three of them, wondering how many times I had to repeat myself over the years, but this time I didn't answer. I just smiled, as if I were watching a poorly scripted sitcom. Bayla jumped in again. Oh, by the way, Mom, I saw on LinkedIn that Patty's daughter is now a finance manager for an investment fund. At 27 and already managing close to $10 million? Pretty amazing. Mom caught on instantly. See, those who know how to plan succeed. Unlike this one, she said, nodding toward me, moving around constantly, transferring bases. It's no wonder things never feel stable. I clenched my jaw, silent. The very relocations they mocked were the reason I had been entrusted with overseeing top-secret federal projects. But no one asked. No one wanted to know. So, Naomi, Spencer turned to me, what exactly have you been up to? Still logistics and admin stuff? I set down my fork, looking straight at him. You think the Army only does logistics and paperwork? Spencer shrugged. I didn't say that. But you've never really been clear about what you do. Because every time I try to explain, I said calmly, no one listens. An abrupt silence blanketed the dinner table like a heavy cloth. The only sound was the clinking of silverware. My father eventually broke the tension with his gravelly voice. Tomorrow's the big meeting with the CEO at headquarters. Spencer's been selected to present the proposal for the new integrated defense platform. If it goes well, he could be moved up to the National Contract Coordination Team. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the Tier 3 electronic defense system? Yeah, he replied, now slightly hesitant. How do you know about that? I shrugged. I mighta read about it. Spencer laughed. Don't worry, sis. Those high-tech specs probably don't overlap with what you're doing. I smiled and nodded. No one in that room knew I was the one who had signed off on the core technology of that system, and tomorrow, I'd be sitting at the head of the conference table, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as Colonel Naomi Evans, Pentagon liaison. That night, I lay still on my old bed, the faded high school bedsheet still holding the faint scent of the cheap detergent my mom always used. The streetlight outside cast uneven shadows on the ceiling, where I once stuck dozens of sticky notes with my goals for the future. Some were still there, the ink faded but the meaning intact. I closed my eyes and memories came rushing back like a scab torn open too soon. Back then, I had just received the full ROTC scholarship. I still remember how my heart pounded when I opened the thick envelope, the bright red seal of the U.S. Department of Defense printed across the page. I thought my parents would be proud. Finally, their daughter had a stable path, combining college with serving the country. But I was completely wrong. I placed the letter on the dinner table, full of hope. I got in. Full scholarship. I'll be training as an officer while studying computer engineering. My father didn't even look at the paper. He just sat there, gripping his coffee cup. You're throwing away your future to be a soldier, he said. Not loudly, but it hit me like a stone on my chest. It's not just being a soldier, I tried to stay calm. This is a chance to access military tech, cybersecurity. I could go even further than Spencer. Don't bring your brother into this, my mother cut in. He chose a clear, safe path, and you're diving into something no one in this family understands. I stood up then, took the letter back, and went to my room. No tears fell, but my heart went ice cold. From the moment I officially joined the program, they missed every milestone. Officer oath ceremony. They said they had to attend the wedding of Dad's boss's son. First assignment? Too far, too expensive, they said. When I got promoted to captain, I sent a photo. No one replied. Only one person showed up. Aunt Lorraine, Mom's sister. She drove all the way from San Jose to Colorado Springs, sat in the back row for 3 hours, holding a cheap bouquet of fake flowers, and cried like a baby when I stood at attention in front of the flag. You did good, Naomi, she whispered, hugging me so tightly I thought my uniform might tear. I used to believe time would change my parents, that one day they'd see me not as the stubborn daughter, but as a woman who built her career with discipline and loyalty. But as the years passed, the only thing that grew was the distance. 3 years ago, I was transferred to the Cyber Command at Fort Meade, where I joined a task force tracking large-scale cyber attacks. That's where I met General Ava Sinclair, the woman I owed my entire career to. Evans, she said after a 7-hour Pentagon meeting. I've never seen anyone handle a crisis with your speed and precision. You've got a strategic mind. If you're willing, I want you in my special unit. And I said yes. From then on, I became a key player in a series of federal-level electronic defense missions. Last year, after a 5-month investigation, I led the team that uncovered a covert attack targeting the National Satellite Defense Database. We shut it down just as the hacker was prepping to download classified files. 2 weeks later, I was promoted to colonel at age 28, the youngest in the unit's history. The ceremony was modest but dignified. Ava pinned the silver eagle on my shoulder herself. You earned this, Naomi. Not through connections, not through luck, through grit. I still keep the photo from that day in my wallet. Whenever I feel like I'm not enough, I look at her eyes. Not a hint of doubt, only faith. I pulled the photo out now, studying it in the dark. Everyone has their own kind of family. Some are born into support, others have to build their own worth without needing anyone's permission. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky over Bakersfield was still gray and laced with mist, but my mind was fully alert. After folding my blanket and doing one last check on my uniform, I stood in front of the mirror, buttoned each clasp, and smoothed the collar until every crease was perfect. The silver eagle insignia gleamed under the light, a silent declaration: I didn't come here to compromise. I left the house before my parents and Spencer even came down for breakfast. They would arrive at the company in a separate car, completely unaware that my name was now on the internal reception list. Not as Mr. Evans's daughter, but as Colonel Naomi Evans, United States Department of Defense. Stratwell Technologies' headquarters rose like a fortress of steel and glass in the industrial outskirts. The security gate had a biometric scanner, but I didn't wait long. The moment I rolled down the window, the guard caught a glimpse of the Colonel insignia, stood at attention, and nodded. Good morning, Colonel Evans. VIP parking is ready inside. I gave a faint smile and turned the wheel, heading straight to the executive lot. Inside the 5th-floor conference hall, tech staff were setting up the presentation screens. The air smelled like fresh coffee and printed paper. I stepped in without needing an introduction. A woman with short silver hair dressed in a sleek gray suit immediately walked over with a sharp look in her eyes. Colonel Evans, she extended her hand. Shannon Murphy, it's an honor to have you here today. I just hope our collaboration runs as smoothly as the previous rounds of discussions. I hope so too, Ms. Murphy, I replied, shaking her hand with just the right firmness. Not weak, not overbearing, but the balanced grip of someone who's given commands in Strategic Zone 4. Less than 10 minutes later, the senior leadership team from Stratwell began to enter. My father, Charles Evans, strode in with a thick folder in hand. Spencer followed closely behind, chatting enthusiastically with a chief engineer. They hadn't seen me, not until Spencer looked up and froze in place. His gaze landed on my uniform, then moved up to the insignia, my shoulder rank, and finally, my face. Naomi? I stood tall and nodded. Good morning, Spencer. My father took a few seconds to piece it together. When he realized the woman standing at the center of the table, in full colonel uniform among executive leaders, was his daughter, his eyes widened and didn't blink. Before anyone could ask anything, Shannon Murphy spoke up. I'd like to begin today's conference by introducing the most critical figure in this project. As you know, Project Aegis is one of Stratwell's largest strategic contracts, worth over $1 billion in direct partnership with the Department of Defense. All eyes turned toward me. I didn't move a muscle. This is Colonel Naomi Evans, the official representative from the Pentagon, responsible for overseeing the entire technical phase and implementation of Project Aegis. I saw Charles swallow hard. Spencer stood frozen, his face turning pale. I thought, he stammered, Naomi just did something with logistics. I used to manage security logistics in Operation Green Vault, then moved to the Electronic Warfare Division and later to Strategic Command, I said firmly. Currently, I lead the Integrated Defense Compatibility Audit Team under the Department of Cybersecurity. Shannon nodded with deep respect. She's the only person in this room with the authority to approve or suspend the entire technical process of Project Aegis, if deemed necessary. The silence that followed stretched on, like someone had vacuumed the air out of the room. I've reviewed the encryption system plan your team's been working on. I turned directly to Spencer. I have a few questions about the Level 4 countermeasure software integration. We'll discuss it after the presentation. Spencer stiffened. You're really the project lead? Yes, and I'll need your first adjustment report by this afternoon. No one said a word after that. Only my father's stunned gaze followed my every move, as if he were staring at a completely unfamiliar version of his own daughter. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see with full clarity, that the person he once said wasn't cut out to survive in the real world now held his company's billion-dollar blueprint in her hands. And this was just the beginning. Spencer was invited to present after the first two technical teams. As he stepped onto the small stage at the front of the conference table, the lapel mic trembled slightly with his hand. I'm Spencer Evans, Regional Manager overseeing the integration interface for Project Aegis, he began, his voice a little higher than usual. Today I'll be presenting our proposal to streamline the data response process between the internal system and the encryption platform provided by our military partner. I quietly opened the document on my iPad, eyes fixed on the slides he was projecting. Spencer continued, leading into a comparison of the old protocol and the new one his team proposed. He tried to keep a steady pace, but I noticed his explanation lacked technical depth. Several terms were used out of context, and the data table lacked clear definitions for input variables. I raised my hand. May I ask a question? I said, eyes locked on him. In the third section of slide 8, you mentioned eliminating the intermediate encryption gate sync check to reduce response time. Could you detail the alternative safeguards proposed to mitigate the increased risk? Spencer froze. He looked at the slide, then down at his notes. Yes, that part is still in testing, but the technical team plans to add an extra validation layer or something like SHA-3 or similar. I tilted my head. SHA-3 isn't compatible with high-speed bidirectional streams in real-time distributed systems. Have you simulated this using actual battlefield data? A nearby technical director turned to look at me, then back at Spencer, who was visibly flushed. We haven't conducted that level of simulation, Spencer answered quietly. I placed the iPad on the table. Then I recommend halting implementation of this protocol until full testing is completed, and I want to receive a detailed risk model and accurate performance metrics by this Friday. The room went silent. The admiration once directed towards Spencer now shifted toward me. No longer skeptical, but respectful. The technical director, Mr. Malik, spoke up first. I must admit, the issues you raised are absolutely valid. We rushed to approve this proposal based only on the architecture diagram. Shannon Murphy nodded. Thank you, Colonel Evans. That's exactly why you're here. This project is the foundation for a series of future defense contracts. There's no room for error. She turned to the executive team. Effective this week, Colonel Evans will directly oversee performance evaluations for all technical and coordination teams, including Spencer's department. Spencer's face went stiff. My father stared at me, as if recalculating everything he had ever assumed about his daughter. But this time, he had nothing to say. I nodded slightly. I'll work with the engineering division to outline a concrete assessment plan. The focus will be on real-world deployment capability, system compatibility, and especially stability under coordinated cyber attacks. A board member of Ellison from legal whispered to Shannon, not quite softly enough for me to miss, "She's razor sharp. I thought this was just some honorary appointment." Shannon smiled and replied, "No. She was hand-picked by strategic command. No internal referrals involved." The meeting continued with other presentations, but no one dared to be careless again. They now understood a single question from me could make or break a technical proposal or a managerial position. After the conference ended, Shannon walked up to me. "I'm deeply impressed. Actually, I should say grateful," she said softly. "Your presence has changed the entire way our executive team views this project." "I'm just doing my job," I replied. "National security can't be traded for internal politics or family ties." I noticed my father standing at the far end of the room, trying to catch my eye. But I didn't stop. I walked out of the hall with steady steps, leaving behind a room that had just witnessed a quiet power shift, where the difficult daughter they once dismissed was now the person who could determine the very survival of the project they staked their reputations on. That afternoon, while I was reviewing documents with the internal security team in a side conference room, my private phone rang. The screen lit up. Mom. I hesitated for a second, then picked up. "Naomi," my mother, Grace, said, her voice a mix of confusion and barely hidden discomfort. "Your father, Spencer, we want to talk privately after work." I checked the time. 7 o'clock. Executive floor, conference room 4. Just the three of us. Sorry. Exactly at 7 p.m., I stepped into the room. Gone was the blinding light from the morning's conference. Only warm amber lighting remained above the table, and 3 family members already seated, tense, silent, like I was there to deliver a verdict. "Can you explain what this is all about?" my father, Charles, began. His voice was still deep, but now laced with a rare note of caution. "Which of the hundreds of things you've ignored over the years are you referring to?" I sat across from them and placed my military pack firmly on the table. "You're a colonel," my mother blurted out, as if still in disbelief. That couldn't have happened without—" "I was promoted 3 months ago at a Pentagon ceremony," I cut in. "Not through luck, not through connections. The name Evans wasn't mentioned in the nomination paperwork. Only mine." Spencer clenched his hands. "Then why didn't you ever say anything? You let yourselves believe I was still the awkward girl who didn't know what she wanted, who joined the military because she couldn't cut it in business school." I looked him in the eyes. "I tried to tell you. I called. I wrote. I invited you all to my commissioning ceremony. Not once did anyone show up." My father leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "We may have been wrong, but you didn't have to show up like that. At the conference, in uniform, making everyone uncomfortable." I gave a quiet laugh. "I didn't show up for theatrics. I'm here for work. I'm representing the Department of Defense, overseeing a contract worth over $1 billion. If my family happens to be getting paid under that same contract, well, that's an interesting coincidence, not favoritism. My mother lowered her head but spoke, her voice nearly a whisper. Why did you choose this path? We prepared everything. Private scholarships, connections at UC Berkeley, even an internship at the bank. Because that was everything you wanted, I replied, my tone calm but firm. I wanted to serve. I wanted to understand systems. I wanted to do something meaningful, not stand behind polished desks and learn to hide mistakes behind PowerPoints. Spencer's voice tightened. But you humiliated me, in front of the technical director, in front of Murphy. I did my job, I turned to him. You presented a dangerous proposal. No risk checks, no real-world data. If it had been anyone else, I would have done the same. No exceptions. The air in the room felt like it could snap. Then my father suddenly spoke again, softer and slower than ever before. I was wrong. Years ago, when you showed me that scholarship letter, all I saw was fear. That I'd lose you, that you wouldn't be safe. That I'd lose my only daughter to a path I didn't understand. I looked at him. Those were words I'd waited over a decade to hear, but I never thought I'd hear them here in a cold boardroom with no family photos on the walls. I don't need you to feel guilty, I answered quietly. I don't need an apology. I don't need validation. Then what do you need? My mother asked. For the first time, her gaze wasn't judgmental, but genuinely trying to understand. I need respect, I said. Not for being a colonel, not for the contract, but because I'm Naomi. Because I've worked relentlessly for 11 years to prove one thing. I'm worth it. Silence filled the room. Spencer exhaled, eyes dropping to the table. I never thought you'd accomplish something this big. I thought I was the one with the clear path. And that's the problem, I said. You couldn't imagine it because no one ever taught you to see me as an equal. We grew up with the same map, I just chose to redraw the route. My father nodded slowly. Then, can we start again? From here? I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room. The place where 3 people who once dismissed my career now sat in front of me. Not as superiors, not with disappointment. Finally, I nodded. We can try. That morning, I returned to Stratwell earlier than usual to continue evaluating the technical team. As I stepped into the strategic planning room, I saw something that wasn't on the schedule. My father was standing in the corner, waiting. He wasn't wearing his usual pressed gray suit from the day before. Instead, it was a simple shirt and an expression stripped of all pretense. No hesitation, no forced pride. Good morning, Colonel Evans, he said, and it was the first time in my life I had ever heard him call me by that title. I paused, looked at him carefully, and for the first time I saw that man. The one who made me believe respect had to be earned by conditions. Standing in front of me not as a father, but as someone trying to relearn how to acknowledge a daughter he had overlooked for years. I was so wrong, Naomi, he continued, his voice rougher than usual. I let my own bias about what proper success looks like blind me. I didn't see that you weren't just capable, you were capable in a way I couldn't comprehend. I looked at him, stirred, not out of anger, but because I never expected to hear those words come out of his mouth. A man who had always believed there was only one right path, and that I'd veered off it from the beginning. I don't need your apology, I said quietly, but I acknowledge the fact that you said this. Maybe. That's a start. He nodded. He didn't say anything else, but that nod held more weight than any speech he could have made. That evening I received a message from my mother. Made pot roast. Are you free? Spencer's coming too. I stared at my phone for a long while. Then I replied with just one word. The kitchen in our house hadn't changed, except for one small thing. On the refrigerator, wedged between expense notes and a water bill, was a photo of me in uniform, standing next to General Avis Sinclair during the promotion ceremony. I'd never sent it. Someone had clearly found it and printed it out. My mom was ladling broth into bowls, her hand slightly trembling. When I walked in, she didn't speak, just glanced at me and placed the bowl on the table. "It's a little salty," she mumbled. "I used to like it that way," I replied. She didn't argue, just sat down. The air was heavy, but no longer tight, like everyone was learning how to breathe again in a new language. Spencer arrived late, shirt still wrinkled from clearly rushing straight from the office. "Hey," he said, scratching his head. "I've been thinking all day about what to say, but honestly, no words really seem enough." I tilted my head, waiting. "I used to think I was the one ahead," he continued, "that I understood things better, did things right, even, was more loved. But yesterday, when I saw you walk into that boardroom, confident, decisive, with the CEO standing up to greet you, for the first time I realized I never really knew you, and I never really tried to." He paused, then bowed his head. "I'm sorry. Not just for the dumb things I said the other day, but for all those years I believed you were lesser, just because you weren't like me." I said nothing, but I reached over, tapped the edge of his bowl. "You gonna eat? It's hot." He smiled, relieved. My mom sat still for a moment, then finally spoke, her voice still uncertain. "I was wrong to think there's only one right way to live," she sighed. "I don't understand your world. I don't get the ranks or systems. But I'm proud of you. I just didn't know how to show it." "It's okay," I said, for the first time feeling something soften inside. "We've got time to practice now." When dinner ended, my father poured tea. He set the cup down, looked at me and said, "Naomi, if anyone asks what my daughter does, I won't hesitate anymore. I'll say she's Colonel Naomi Evans. She's responsible for safeguarding a system you rely on every single day." That made me smile, not because the words were perfect, but because they were real. And what's more valuable than a truth spoken by someone who once doubted you could be anything at all? No medals, no stage, just a home-cooked meal, a few honest sentences, and eye contact that no longer flinched. I didn't forgive instantly, but I started by staying an extra evening, explaining my work in the simplest terms I could so my parents might understand a piece of the woman they once failed to see. And they began to listen, this time truly listen. 6 months later, a mild early spring evening in Washington, D.C. felt like a soft breath. My apartment on the 12th floor, overlooking the Potomac complex, caught the sunlight as if all things old had faded with the gloomy days. I had just set the chocolate mousse cake on the table when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, my mother stepped in first, carrying a large insulated bag, the warm scent of cinnamon and butter wafting out enchantingly. "I made apple pie, your favorite," she said, smiling shyly as she set the bag down on the kitchen counter. "This time I used Grandma's original recipe." I paused for a moment, then nodded. "You remembered well." "I wrote it down, but it never turned out this good before," she added, as if trying her best. My father followed, dressed in a simple white shirt, holding something carefully framed. He walked over and held it out like he was offering a treasure. "This week's paper. You're on the front page," he said, eyes meeting mine. "I had it framed, one for the office, one for home. And this is for you." I looked at the photo, me shaking hands with the Secretary of Defense at the awards ceremony for the National Cyber Defense System. The headline read, "Colonel Naomi Evans, the silent warrior behind America's cybersecurity network." "You put it up at your office?" I asked, surprised. He smiled. "Right above the bookshelf. It's the first thing people see when they walk in." "Your coworkers must have been shocked," I teased. "They were," he nodded, "really shocked. But now everyone knows I have a daughter more accomplished than most of our senior execs." The doorbell rang again. It was Gregory. My younger brother wore a light gray blazer, holding a bottle of Italian red wine. "This is the kind you had at the gala last month, right?" he asked. I raised an eyebrow. "You keeping up with all those press articles now?" "You're in the news every week," Spencer shrugged. "I read them just to keep up." Everyone laughed. The atmosphere today felt different. I invited everyone into the living room. They sat on the cream-colored sofa I bought last month, their eyes no longer wandering awkwardly like the first time they came here. My father looked around the bookshelf and paused at a frame in the center, me standing between two women. My mother on my ROTC graduation day, and General Ava Sinclair, the only woman who ever taught me that respect doesn't always come from blood, it comes from unwavering belief. I glanced at the clock. A special guest will be joining us for dinner shortly. Someone from the command department? My mom asked as she poured the tea. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang once more. Standing outside was General Ava Sinclair, in a casual outfit but still walking with that commanding presence. Her cropped silver hair looked sharp, and her smile was sharper than any medal I had ever received. "Good evening, Colonel Evans," she said softly, then hugged me like an old relative. I stepped aside and motioned her in. "General Sinclair, this is my family. My father, Charles. My mother, Grace. And my younger brother, Spencer." Ava shook each of their hands with formality and care. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Naomi's spoken of all of you with more patience than most people would have," she smiled. My father chuckled, hesitating briefly but clearly trying to stay composed. "General Sinclair, I truly appreciate that you saw what we failed to see for far too long." Ava simply nodded, but her gaze toward me said everything that didn't need to be spoken aloud. During dinner, she shared a few old military stories, carefully selected without revealing anything classified. My mother listened intently, even jotting down some unit names on a notepad. My father asked questions that made it clear he was genuinely trying to understand, not just making conversation. Gregory asked about interagency work opportunities with the military, a question I never imagined coming from him. When dessert was served, the warm apple pie my mother had made, Ava set down her fork and looked at me thoughtfully. "Naomi," she said, "you've come a long way to be here, but tonight, seeing your family at this table, I think maybe you've gone even farther than I imagined." I smiled, eyes slightly stinging, not from pride, but because for the first time, I didn't have to stand alone to prove anything. They saw it for themselves, and this time, they didn't look away. And just like that, in a small apartment in the capital, a once wounded family began to relearn how to love. Through listening, through long unspoken words, and through a simple apple pie that carried the spring we had once missed. After dessert, as the living room softened under the glow of warm yellow light on the walls, my father, Charles, stood up with a glass of red wine in his hand. He didn't clear his throat like he usually did, nor did he reach for an awkward joke to break the silence. He just looked at me and began, "Naomi, our daughter." He paused, as if weighing every word, not to impress, but because he understood that each word now carried weight. "You used to ask questions that caught me off guard. You didn't like the path I laid out. You didn't follow the footsteps our family expected. I used to think that was a mistake." His gaze passed over my mother, then Spencer, and finally settled back on me. "But that mistake led you somewhere none of us ever imagined, not just because you hold the rank of colonel, not because of the headlines, but because you live by principle, and you defend what you believe is right." The room fell silent. My mother gently held her glass, and Spencer nodded quietly. My father raised his glass, the wine catching the light. "Things you try to not. I'm not here to celebrate your accomplishments. I want to honor the person you chose to become, even if it meant walking alone, even when no one believed in you, even when I was one of the reasons you felt the need to prove yourself." He turned fully to face me. "You did it, and I'm proud of you." Looked at him for a long moment. In his eyes, he was no longer just the man who lived for spreadsheets, titles, corporate galas, and quantifiable achievements. He was a father, finally learning to see his daughter for who she was, not who he expected her to be. I lifted my own glass and gently tapped it against his. No grand words needed. After dinner, when everyone had gone, my mother was the last to hug me. Slightly, not for long, but tight. "Will you come to Bakersfield this summer?" she asked. "Just a few days. Don't worry about anything. I want to replant the lavender bed out front, like when you were little." I smiled faintly. "I'll try to arrange it." She nodded. "That's all I ask." I returned to the balcony after they left. The city shimmered below, car horns faint in the distance, like the steady breath of a life no longer constrained by old definitions. I sat down, half a glass of wine still in hand, not to get drunk, but to remember tonight clearly. Every glance, every long unspoken word, every small gesture that showed I no longer had to fight to be heard. I didn't need to prove anything, didn't need to demand recognition, because now I had something I once thought too rare to hope for, being seen for who I truly am. Not the stubborn daughter, not the one who didn't fit the family career, not the one who always went her own way, but Naomi Evans, a regular woman who chose a different path and walked it with full faith in herself. And as I closed my eyes and tilted my face into the cool night breeze of the capital, I knew I didn't need anything else. I had arrived on my own terms, and for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. Naomi Evans' story proves that you don't need to follow the path others laid out just to earn respect. True recognition doesn't come from titles. It comes from living your values, even if that means standing alone. In real life, many are dismissed simply for choosing a different route. But like Naomi, if you stay committed, keep learning, and refuse to give up, the very people who once doubted you will have no choice but to listen. And sometimes that quiet shift in respect is the greatest victory of all. What do you think about Naomi's journey and her family's transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real, moving stories about family and finding your voice.